relatively stable most of the time, but sometimes I'm not sure what happens. And of course, because we're trying to stream to more than one platform, so that could be a reason. So, uh, if you are watching this live, this is take two.
And Murphy's Law did come in.
Yeah, take two of a live streaming episode of Candid Conversations about network marketing. So you kind of miss a little bit of the intro. I'm not really sure whether it's going to be joined together in a sense because it shows me that I'm still live, but this got cut off, right? But let's roll with the punches and let's see how it goes, right, Dr. Wei?
Yeah, yeah, very true, mate. Very true. Yes. So today, what we're going to be talking about is how your thoughts and feelings change your destiny. So this one's really tied up with one of the universal laws that we will talk about shortly. And one of the things that we want to really go through now is kind of what the theme of the show is about. And being network marketers, remembering the most important thing that you, and especially this is the first time you've watching this podcast or listening, one of the most important things is identifying your ideal prospect, ideal client. So if you're new to this, please write that down, and identifying that person is really, really important. So for people listening, so here is the burning question that we believe is on everyone's network marketing lips. So there's three particular burning questions that we believe that is on everyone's network marketing lips, and that is, why are others doing so well and I feel stuck? That is often asked of us. Next question is, why are others building their network marketing business easily without bugging their family and friends and loved ones? How are they actually doing that? And why are other people's teams actively recruiting while my team seems to be asleep? And we use the analogy there of the active recruiting person as the roaring lion, and then the team that seems to be asleep as sort of like the sloth or the a little bit slower, for example. So those are the burning questions, and BK and I will give you the answers by looking at universal laws and by looking at how the mind is the major reason why things don't happen or do happen the way that you want. For example, with most network marketing companies, nearly all the great ones, there's plenty of tools, isn't there, BK? There's just plenty of tools out there. But why aren't people growing their businesses? And even in small business, why do 80% of small businesses fail? Why do up to 80% of network marketing fail? Why do franchises fail? You can keep on talking about it. And in terms of why do people fail, and if we use Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule, it's consistently about 80%. And it's not the tools. There's bucket loads of tools. Even franchises, you got all the tools you could ever need, but still people fail. And the reason is because of the 6 inches between our ears. Isn't that right, BK?
Yeah, and also interestingly, I was just talking to my team this week that very interesting idea is that if you compare network marketing as a business with any other kind of business, sometimes the things that are in our favor also can be detrimental to us because the barrier of entry to this business is so low that a lot of times people come into network marketing with I will try, I'll give it a try kind of a mentality, or I will sometimes have this. I treat it like I'm buying a lottery ticket. If I join for a couple of weeks and I find the right two people, right, to the right five persons, because a lot of times we do tell this kind of fairy tale stories to people, and therefore a lot of people don't set their mindset right from the start. Whereas
Yeah,
in
yeah,
contrast, like what Dr. Wayne is just saying, when you join or when you start a kind of a typical regular business, the cost of entry is usually maybe at least easily in the tens of thousands, maybe in the hundreds of thousands sometimes. And because of that, something else happens in their mind, right? The mindset is actually, I'm going to give it a go for at least a while, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
sometimes the cards are stacked against us in network marketing, right? Especially for the concept of where we start off in our mind and our mindsets.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's a very good point. and we see it all the time. And still, even though even though the entry point for small business franchises is a lot higher, still 80% fail. So over it might be a 5 year period, but at least they stick it out for 5 years. They give it a good go. So the barrier of entry, as you mentioned, BK, because you don't have to worry about stock, you don't have to worry about customer support, you don't have to worry about inventory, you don't have to worry about none of that, or your entry, as you said, is so low. All you have to do is basically find a lead generation system that works, that doesn't entail going to family and friends. If you want to do that because someone wants your product, that's great. But what sort of lead generation system can you basically then put together that's going to allow your business to grow? And every business has the same challenge, that's for sure. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomena. And so to continue with today's podcast, remembering last time our first live one was how to change your stars, and we used the analogy of a knight's tale with Heath Ledger. And we basically went through that in terms of how we can change our stars in our network marketing business. And we actually looked at 8 ways on how to change your stars. We went through that in great detail as well. So for those people who haven't heard of it as yet, or you missed it for whatever reason, please go back and watch it. And BK will talk about how to do that as we move through it. So we'll move more into now how your thoughts and feelings can change your stars, as said. And the major thing that I want to touch on here to start with is the mind. So I want you to think of the mind is always monitoring the body. So this is a really, really important concept to really grasp, because the mind or thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. But what happens is our thoughts then, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon what type of thought it is, especially if the thought is then attached to heightened emotion, then basically becomes the language of the body. So what happens is we'll think, and then we'll feel, and then we'll feel, and then we'll think, and we keep on basically going backwards and forwards until whatever that we're thinking about now becomes a habit. And sometimes our habits that have been formed are really positive, and then other times our habits can be negative. And if we look at the scientific data at present, whereby 80% of our thoughts, unfortunately, are pessimistic, what happens is generally our habits then become very, very, they don't create momentum, we'll put it that way, for example.
And to put it into perspective, like I always like to do, because sometimes when we talk about some concepts like this, it seems a little bit esoteric and out of our usual space of understanding, normal things. All you have to do is think of a recent movie you have watched that was enjoyable for you. It could be a horror movie, it could be a adventure movie, it could be a science fiction. And you know, when you sit inside the cinema, the theater, right, and you kind of like, all you see are images and words and dialogue, and sometimes a very engaging scene can evoke all kinds of emotions and maybe even bring you to tears, or shock you, or make you jump in your seat, right? So how did that all happen? It happened simply because of a combination of words and language and pictures that were directed to you, to your brain, from the director, of the movie, right? And that created and elicited certain emotions, triggered certain emotions in your body. I mean, you could literally feel your heart racing, right? You could feel yourself accelerated. You could feel yourself happy or sad, or even sometimes you literally can be in tears, right? So that is exactly what's going on. Imagine a movie, because they have engineered it to be like that. But in our body, every single, like what Dr. Wayne was saying, right? Every thought that we have is kind of like a mini movie that we're playing for ourselves. And imagine
Yes.
the things that are going on in our body as we play out 70,000 movies every single day. And if they are bad ones.
Yeah. And what happens then is, depending upon, as you said there, BK, that thought, then what happens then that propels, then that thought will go into the physical body, becomes a feeling, a heightened emotion, and then it propels that thought into the future. So therefore, that habit or that thought, so the thought that we think then becomes kind of like a habit, then a habit then becomes a personality, then a personality then becomes basically your destiny, so to speak. So, and what we've got to try and do all the way through this is actually try look at what you're thinking about, and it's a interesting concept if you've never done it before. The words used today is mindfulness. The ancients used the word silent witnessing. There's other words that are used as well, but mindfulness is the word being used today, where what we're trying to do all the time is be mindful of what we're thinking about. And when we notice that we're thinking about the negative, then what happens is we need to say, oh, that's the old Wayne, for example. Now, what can I think about that's going to give a thought that's going to go to my brain, and then that can then elicit a feeling in my body that is now going to be of a positive nature. And this is how we can change everything about who we are. And this is actually wrapped into the law of cause and effect, which is the sixth universal law. And as we know with the the law of cause and effect, as it suggests, that basically everything has its effect, every effect has its cause. So every thought that we think about, whether it be a word or an action, or then what it does, then it sets in specific types of motions. And then what happens is those motions will then materialize. And the law of abundance or the law of attraction is the underpinning law of all these laws. And the law of attraction then basically states that whatever you think about most then gets put into your reality. It doesn't matter what you think about most. So that's really, really, really important to understand, especially if you are in your network marketing business and you now want to duplicate. So you've got to a level of your business, you're getting regular leads in, you've actually found out how to do that, you're comfortable with that. And now you want to duplicate because you now understand the importance of duplication. But if one of your old thoughts, old habits, old ways of doing things is that you really are more of an introvert, then what happens now is going to be quite difficult for you if you allow your introversion to actually take over your being. And remember, the human body loves change. The mind might not, but the human body loves change. And this has been picked up in physical as well. So the worst thing you can ever do in exercise is do the same level of intensity. So if you run, say 5 kilometers, for example, if you do the same level of intensity where the heart is not having a variable up and down, in the long run, that is not very, and that's quite interesting in the long run. In the long run, I'll use those words, it's not very good for your heart. Whereas if you do 5Ks and then you might do, 100 meters, you might do three quarters, then you might do a kilometer where you're doing half pace, then you might do 100 meters of full pace, and then you go back to three-quarter, and you vary your intensity. The heart loves that. The body loves that. However, getting back to the mind really is fearful of change because it likes the known. But it's only from the unknown that we can actually create a new future, because the known has always been created because of the past. So hopefully we get that. So how do we create 80% of our future is created because of past thoughts. And those past thoughts, the law of attraction will come in and basically allow those thoughts now to become a reality. So what we've got to do now is understand that through mindfulness, pick up that thought as maybe not a good thought, and then create a new thought that allows us now to have a feeling that embraces that, so then we can move forward. So an example would be, and there's many, many studies that I can use, but say, for example, we've got 10 people who we divide them into five, and they're basketballers. And we put all five people physically. They're now shooting hoops from a particular distance away, say 3 meters away. And then the other five people, they're actually now doing it within their mind. And the exercise is for, say, 30 days, and every day you've got to do this for at least 15 minutes. So the people doing it for 15 minutes, physically shooting hoops, they have their results after each session, and they write it all down for the five different people. And the five people over here, all they're doing is meditating, and they're actually shooting hoops for 15 minutes. And then what they do then is, after the 30 days, then they'll go and get the 10 people and they'll shoot hoops. And the five people who were meditating have generally better scores than the five people who are actually shooting hoops. So the reason I bring that up is because if we can now place ourselves as a duplicator, so we bring up an emotion, a heightened emotion, that we are doing an exceptionally good job as a duplicator. We're now allowing our businesses to grow, and we put that into the future from the now. What happens now is that now will become a reality. Maybe not straight away, but the more that you basically really feel that and understand that, the more that this new you now becomes you. The challenge, though, as soon as you go back into the old thought, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm an introvert, blah, 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 you'll then pull it back. So this is how we can now actually make something that may have only taken, for example, a month to become a good duplicator by creating these mind movies, so to speak, of positivity. But every time you think of the negative, it might bring it back. So now it might take 3 months or 6 months. And this is what we talk about collapsing time, BK, don't we? How we can actually collapse time.
Yeah, the interesting thing about what Dr. Wayne just shared about the basketball study, for example, is that the mind doesn't quite understand or doesn't quite distinguish between actual practice and a virtual practice in the brain or in the mind. So you could actually spend an hour on a basketball court and shoot like 3 pointers, right? And you practice go through the motion. But and the mind understands that you are doing that, right? But if you do it
Yes.
virtually, as in you imagine and you visualize it in your mind, and you go through it maybe more than tens of thousands of times, the mind also doesn't distinguish the two, and therefore you have actually avail yourself, made available to yourself, many hours of practice without having to go to the practice, right? And it achieves the same kind of results. And in fact, just like I was telling my team this week as well, success leaves clues, right? So
Yes.
the reason why we are doing this show is because we want to help people to rise above the level of success that they want. And if you around you, if you just even in your company, for sure, if you ask any of the top achievers right now, you I would reckon that 99% of them would tell you that they did this mental exercise of visualizing their future before they were successful. They did this exercise of improving their mind, sharpening their mind, building up a vision board, a dream board, and
Yeah.
then they realize this sometime down the line. Now, some people, like what Dr. Wayne suggested, they collapsed time. They did it in record time. Some people
Yeah.
achieved the highest ranks in their company in like much faster than anybody did. And some people took a little bit longer, right? I mean, but they still arrived at the same kind of destination that they wanted. So that is what is possible. And if you, like I said, if you ask any of the successful leaders in your company, almost 99 of them will tell you that that's how they did it, right? But
Yeah.
then when we ask someone new to do this exercise, then often it's going to have that Pareto principle again, where out of 10 persons that you say, hey, this is one thing you can do, 80% of them won't do it. Only the 10-20% will do it. And therefore,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
the irony of it all, right? In essence.
So let's look at it from a once again a physical perspective. So then we can actually analyze how the mind then creates the feeling, then creates the routine, the habit, etc. So say, for example, and once again, just using science, and if you, once you do the mindfulness, and what we suggest people do is just randomly, half a dozen times a day, just ask yourself, what am I thinking about? And you'll be amazed at what you're thinking about. And 8 out of 10 times it'll be, if you don't change the thought, some people are able to do that, but if you'll just allow yourself to literally pick up on what you're thinking about, unfortunately, a lot of it is negative, unfortunately. So what happens, what we do know from science is that every day, now listen to these numbers, every day, trillions of new mutations are made epigenetically every day. So what do I mean by that? Once upon a time, Western medicine used to say that whatever your hereditary genes are through genetics, that's the way you will probably end up. So, for example, if your father had arthritis, you'll probably end up with arthritis. If your mother had depression, you'll probably end up with depression. If your mum and dad were poor, you'll probably end up being poor, etc., etc., etc. Now, ancient medicine has never said that. Ancient medicine says you can change your stars, for example, using our last podcast as an example. Ancient medicine has always said if you change your environment, you can change anything about your future circumstances. And even the Jesuits used to say as well, give me the man or the girl, and I'll show you the man or the woman. So what we can do is we can change it. But how does this happen? So with regards to genetics, getting back to that, so we've got this old thought process of genetics. Now, what's happened in the last 20 years, Western medicine has now coined another term called epigenetics. And epigenetics means, epi means above, and therefore we can actually now, what they've now found is that the environment basically influences our genetic expression. So this is what we mean by epigenetics. So, for example, so let's just look at, say, the introvert or the person who finds it difficult to be with people, around people, to grow a team, if we're looking at duplication. Remembering we've already said, yes, that may be you only because of prior thoughts. Remembering 95% of who you are has been pre-programmed prior to the age of 7, meaning that your introvert nature was pre-programmed. It's not you. I really would like for you to really get that. It's not you. So therefore, if that's not you, we can change that. We can change our stars. So how do we then do that? And I want you to understand it from this chemical perspective. So say, for example, now we know that there's trillions and trillions of new mutations occur every day. We can now influence that through these laws, 7 universal laws that we've spoken about in the past. So what happens now is once we pick up a thought that may be negative, we go, okay, that's the old Wayne, for example, and then you actually put in a new thought, and then you actually bring that together with a heightened emotion. What happens now is that new thought will epigenetically change all the different hormones that may have been released due to the negative thought. So say the negative thought now is a predominant. What happens now is cortisol and the negative hormones, and even interleukin-6 and a whole lot of negative, I'll just call them inflammatory markers. There's a whole lot of them are now actually released from the body. They're just released, and therefore you feel tired. You feel, oh, I don't want to do this. This is too hard to do. Every time I get in front of someone, I feel really lousy. I don't feel good. I can't get my message across to my team, for example. Yes, that may be a reality, but if you catch yourself and then actually put yourself into the future and say, when you're doing it in the now, by saying, hey, I'm going to feel great, and I feel thankful for the way my team is duplicating. I feel thankful for the way that I'm able to express myself when I have someone in front of me, and even when I have more people. And you use this positive expression of who you are. Now what happens is the body will now start to, from a hormonal level, start to release different types of hormones like serotonin, which is your happy hormone. It'll actually, if you're having sleeping problems, it'll even help you with your sleep. It'll also start releasing other hormones like dopamine and all these other positive hormones, tryptophan, for example, that now you're in front of your team and you're duplicating, you actually feel good about it. Your introvert now becomes the extrovert. And what happens now if you make this a continuous way of thinking? It becomes a routine, then it becomes a habit, and now it becomes a state of being. Now it becomes you. Now, for example, I'm an introvert. I like being by myself. That's my preferred state of being. But I know how to be an extrovert. And when I'm in it, I enjoy being the extrovert. Initially, it was tough. Okay. But these days, I enjoy being the extrovert. I enjoy being around people and being in seminars and being up the front talking to people. But once again, if I have my true state in being, remembering that probably is not really me, still working on that a little bit, but that's where I prefer to be. I like a little bit of quiet. I like meditating. I like sitting on the beach. But when I need to become the extrovert and talk to my team and be able to duplicate, I'm able to do that as well.
Yeah, I came across an interesting article the other time. So we used to say that there's an introvert and an extrovert. And actually, if you think about it, the true introvert and the true extrovert actually don't do well in most situations. In fact, the author of the article coined a new phrase called ambivert, right? And kind of like if you know the word ambidextrous, which means you can write with both hands, right? You can do things with both hands. So a lot of times, those of us in network marketing, to be honest, a lot of us start off as being very introverted. And in fact, most of the time, it shows that if you are by nature an introvert, you actually might do better in this industry because you know how to slow down, you know how to listen, you know how to be more introspective. But you got to also overcome that kind of like default setting of yours and step out a little bit and become a bit more of an ambivert. That means, embrace a little bit more of the excitement of a extroverted person, right? Which is something that a lot of us actually learn through making changes, through our mindset, through understanding that, hey, we have to be a little bit different when we are in front of our teams, in front of a crowd, doing a presentation and all that, right? So that is actually what Dr. Wayne is trying to say here. And if you succeed in that, you will see a lot of different success in your business as well.
Yes, and your success, and like this podcast, Murphy's Law will come along, and it'll actually put things in front of you, obstacles, and remembering what we call this. This is called the law of resistance. So the law of resistance then will basically just pop its little head up and say, "Hey, you sure you want to be doing this?" Because even with regards to going live, for example, for BK and I'll talk on my behalf. It is a big step forward. It's another level within the internet world that I'm not used to. It's not that I'm not used to being in front of 1,000 people or 500 people live, but this can now go out to millions of people, and that's our intention. With time, this is going to go out to a very, very large audience, but we're starting where we are now. And initially, that brings about within me just a little bit of apprehension. And of course, that apprehension now can be in terms of the law of resistance will come in, and then all of a sudden technology doesn't work as well, or things just, Murphy's Law will come in a little bit stronger, or etc. So as I embrace this and as I'm openly now talking about it, what happens now by just doing that, I'm now taking the edge off of that law of resistance. And an analogy I use, and I'll just grab it here so say, for example, that represents my my resistance towards going out to millions of people on the internet, for example. Now, what happens is when I meditate and I see myself doing this podcast and I see myself working and it all working well, and I see myself going out to millions of people, and I'm happy with what I've done and what BK and I have done, and we're just really influencing so many people. We're making a positive mark on the network marketing industry because we both now believe this to be one of the cleanest industries you can now be in. What happens now, if that's the length of my resistance, by meditating, I might remove that much. Now what happens is by me talking about it now and allowing those emotions to be expressed, understanding that's the old Wayne, and what I'm doing in my mind now is basically seeing myself influencing people in a positive way through humility and gratitude. Now I'm going to take a little bit more off, and then I'm going to do it again. I take a little bit more off, and then I'm going to take a little bit more off. And eventually, this basically then totally disappears. And now there's no anchor. Now there's no Murphy's law. Now there's no law of resistance. And what happens then is the law of attraction now is able to do its job of manifestation in a lot better way or a lot stronger way. And this is how our thoughts and feelings can literally create our destiny. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking to Dr. Wayne because he always makes me think about um, what goes on between the 6 inches of my mind, my brain, and my ears, right? So, like we were saying at the start, a lot of times in most companies that is out there, the technical skills, the know-how, the how-tos, the of everything is usually the training is plentiful even
Yeah,
for personal development, productivity, success mindsets, those trainings are also quite plentiful. But what we have found to be lacking is exactly what we're trying to do here is that why is there a space where why is it that all these things are about plentiful and readily available, and some people are able to excel and some people are not, and this is where we kind of have quite a very candid conversation with you because many times is what's really going on in our minds, and hopefully through our podcast we are able to um, alert you, right? Or make you aware of something that might be going on in your mind that you were previously not aware of. Sometimes it's like that. It's like if you don't point out a pothole to somebody, the person is going to step right into the pothole. But once you are made aware of the pothole, then you can avoid it, right? You can avoid it and you can not step into that, right? And so hopefully that's what we have done, right? So
yeah,
I think that
yeah.
nicely wraps up another episode. Dr. Wei, any concluding thoughts for our listeners and our viewers?
Probably just to put that into perspective, like for myself, in the last 30 years, I've had to go to at least 5 to 15 seminars lasting anything from 3 hours to 3 days. And after 30 years, you kind of know a lot of the information. And if I can take away one important piece of information from a 3 day seminar, I am ecstatic. So, as you said there before, if someone can take away one or two bits of information from this podcast, hopefully you're as ecstatic as what I would be because it can change your life. Because what happens now is that now resonates in your feeling body, and therefore that new way of looking at something can create your destiny in a way that can shortcut or collapse time, whereby your goals can be more received easily.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd always think that we are missing a large chunk of the puzzle, but usually it is just that one little piece that completes the whole jigsaw puzzle. And hopefully, we are able to do that from a week to week basis. And you will, even if you pick up one little gem from, or one little insight from the things we share, we hope that it helps you. And with that, we're going to end today's live episode. And if you want to catch our previous archive episodes, you can look us up at networkmarketerpodcast.com. That's networkmarketerpodcast.com. And we also have show notes for all the past episodes as well, which Dr. Wei has kindly done for us. So please look us up at those areas if you want to look at the archive episodes, right? And also, if you want to dive right into all these things where we talk about the law of attraction and why it works for some people and doesn't work for others, you can check us out at 5, that's the numerical number 5, 5hiddenreasons.com, where we actually talk about why most network marketers fail and why you do not have to. And with that, we conclude our second, not that eventful live stream episode. Better than the first time, right? We're going to get better as we do, right? And feel free to drop us some comments if you are watching this on replay or you're watching us live. Just let us know whether it's live or replay. And if you do have questions for us and there are certain topics or certain parts of the conversation that you kind of want us to explain a little bit further or talk about, sometimes I think people like the practical side of things. Like, okay, so I know this is the problem. You have mentioned this is my problem that I kind of understand. Now tell me what is the next thing I can do, right, Dr. Wayne? That's always the thing that people ask for. So if you want
Certainly.
to do that, let us know. We're happy to continue that conversation. So thank you, Dr. Wayne, once again. I'll see you when I see you.
Okay. Thanks, BK. Thanks, everyone.